Highbridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents 3 Floors Up by Eshkol Nevo, translated by Sandra Silverstone, read by Neil Shah and Deepti Gupta. First Floor. What I'm trying to tell you is that underneath the surprise, there was something else that Ayelet and I didn't dare talk about, that in the back of our minds we knew. Okay, I knew that it could happen. The signs were there the whole time, but we chose to ignore them. What could be more convenient than next-door neighbors who watch your kids for you? Think about it. 5 minutes before you have to leave, you just take your daughter as she is, no bags, no carriage, knock on the door across the hall, and that's it. She's happy to stay with them, they're happy to have her. And you're happy to be free to do your thing, and it's cheaper than a regular babysitter. Talking about stuff like this is unpleasant. But I don't have the energy to censor myself, so I'll just tell you everything, and you promise not to put it in one of your books, okay? A couple of pensioners like them have no idea what the going price for a babysitter is in the free market. They're not part of the Babysitters Information Network, which means that you can tell them any price you want. So we did. 20 shekels an hour. 9 years ago, that was reasonable. Low, but reasonable. In the meantime, the average price in our area climbed to 40, but we stayed at 20. Every once in a while, Ayelet would remind me that we should pay them more, you know, and I'd say, yes, of course we'll pay them more. But we stayed at 20, and they didn't say a word. Refined people, you know, like all those German Jews, the Yekim. He walks around the house in a suit and tie, and she's a piano teacher at the conservatory. Says things like, "If you would be so kind." Even if they wanted to object, their Yeke pride wouldn't let them, and we told ourselves, okay, maybe not out loud, but we thought it, what do they have in their boring lives, those people? They should thank us. They should be paying us for the privilege of being with Ofri. I don't remember exactly how old she was the first time we left her with them, but she was pretty young. How long do you have to wait to have sex with a woman after she gives birth? A month? A month and a half? That's how it started, with sex. Ayelet had toxemia the last month of her pregnancy, so I couldn't touch her. A month after she gave birth, she was still bleeding, and I was so horny I was practically exploding. It had never happened to me before. In the middle of a meeting, I could stare at a woman client and think about dragging her to the restroom and ripping her clothes off. And the thing is, women pick up on that hunger. Loads of them came on to me during that period, loads of them. And it's not like I'm Brad Pitt or anything. I got a text from the spinning instructor that you wouldn't believe. I'll show it to you sometime. But I kept a lid on it. I bit my lips hard, and Ayelet appreciated it. She didn't say, "I appreciate it." She wouldn't say anything like that, but she'd always tell me, "I miss your touch. I need it as much as you do." One night she suggested, "Let's leave her with Herman and Ruth for a few minutes," and she ran her finger over my shoulder slowly, which is a kind of signal we have. It was her idea. Ayelet initiated the first time. Together we knocked on their door and asked if they could take Ofri for a few minutes. I think they understood exactly what was going on, what the urgency was. You can see that they're the kind of old folks who still have that spark between them. Herman's a tall man who stands very straight, looks like a German chancellor, and Ruth has long white hair she always wears pulled back in a ponytail, which makes her look more like a woman than an old lady. She asked Ayelet when Ofri ate the last time, and Ayelet told her that she shouldn't be hungry now, and in any case it's only for a few minutes. She asked whether she took a pacifier and wanted us to leave a diaper, too, to be on the safe side. Then Herman started making funny noises for Ofri and tickled her stomach with the tip of his tie. Ofri smiled at him. Smiles at that age are instinctive, not genuine, you know. But still I said to Ayelet, "Look at how she's smiling at him," and Ruth said, "Children are crazy about Herman." Ofri wouldn't go to just anyone when she was a baby. She even cried when her grandmother held her. But the minute we put her in Ruth's arms, she snuggled up to her, put her head on her breast, and played with her long hair with her fingers. Ruth said, "Sha, sha, sha," and stroked her cheek. Ayelet bent down to Ruth's height and said to Ofri, "We'll be back in a few minutes, okay, sweetie?" Ofri looked at her with that clever expression of hers, then moved her eyes to me. It looked like she was about to cry, but no. She only burrowed deeper into Ruth's chest, and Ruth said, Please, if you would be so kind, do not worry. I raised 3 children and 5 grandchildren. Ayelet said again that it would only be a few minutes, then stroked Ofri's cheek one last time. As soon as our door slammed shut behind us, I grabbed her ass, but she froze and said, "Wait a minute. Do you hear crying?" We stopped and listened, but all we heard were the normal sounds of the widow in the apartment above us dragging furniture. We waited another few seconds just to be sure, and in the end Ayelet took my hand and said, "Please, if you would be so kind, no foreplay, yes?" and pulled me into the bedroom. Herman and Ruth's grandchildren are scattered all over the world, 2 in Vienna, 2 in Palo Alto, and the oldest, who lives with her mother in Paris, comes to visit every summer and drives the teenage boys in the neighborhood crazy with her miniskirts, her tanned skin, and green eyes. They wait for her outside the building like cats in heat, and she toys with them, touches them offhandedly when she talks but doesn't let them touch her. A regular little mademoiselle, already in high heels, wearing women's perfume. Last summer Ruth sent her to ask us for eggs, and I answered the door without my shirt, so she said, in a French accent, "Monsieur Arnon, put on a shirt. It is not very genteel to be like this in front of a lady." And she gave a flirtatious giggle. I brought her the eggs without laughing in return, thinking that you could tell the little minx didn't have a father, that if I were her father, I'd make her take off that mini. But never mind, we'll get to that later. Herman and Ruth's other grandchildren also came to visit once or twice a year, and then their apartment, which is usually quiet except for the sounds of the piano and the voices in the German-language cable channel, suddenly became noisy and full of life. Herman builds the children slides and swings in the garden. Before he retired, he worked for the Israel aircraft industry, so he has the touch for things like that. He also makes them model airplanes they can fly with a remote control. If it's summer, he takes a pool out of the storeroom, a huge one, made of hard plastic, and he builds an aircraft carrier in the pool that they have to try and land the model planes on. Then he takes the carrier out of the pool, and they change into bathing suits and climb inside, splashing each other. But they're not wild. They're well-behaved kids, not like the ones we have here. They eat with a knife and fork, say hello to you on the stairs. When their grandchildren fly back to their countries, Herman and Ruth are depressed. It's a regular routine. The day after the flight, their door is locked, and you know not to knock. There's no way to explain it, as if there's a heaviness in the door that transmits the message, "Not now." 2 days after the grandkids leave, they themselves knock on our door to say that if we want, we can bring them Ofri. Herman says to her, "Give Herman a kiss," and bends down so she can reach his cheek. She kisses him carefully so as not to be scratched by his bristles. Ruth says to Ayelet, "If you need to, you can leave her for a short time, too, no charge." She adds, almost in a whisper, "It's so hard for Herman when the grandchildren leave us. He hasn't slept for 2 days, hasn't eaten, hasn't shaved. I don't know what to do with him." That business with the kiss, for instance, when I told you before that there were signs, I meant things like that. It started with asking Ofri for a kiss when she came in, 1 on each cheek. But this last year, he could suddenly open the door for no reason when we were on the stairs, on the way in or out, bend down, and call to her, "Hey, Ofri, give Herman a kiss." Telling you this now makes me want to die. Was the writing on the wall ever clearer? But we didn't want to see it. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Ayelet's mother is not the person you want to leave your kids alone with. My parents retired and are always taking long trips, South America, China. All of a sudden they decided to be muchieros. That's exactly when Yaeli was born. And she had that complication with her breathing. We spent weeks at her bedside in the hospital, Ayelet and I, taking shifts. And when you were on shift, you couldn't fall asleep because maybe the minute you closed your eyes would be the minute she stopped breathing. You went straight to work after your shift. There wasn't even time to go home and change. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying that we needed Herman and Ruth more and more. In the afternoon, in the evening, on weekends. Sometimes we'd leave Ofri with them for just half an hour, sometimes half a day. Hey, I just remembered. How could I have forgotten? One morning, when Ayelet came to relieve me and start her shift at the hospital, she told me about a dream she had at night. We were both waiting outside the operating room, but the girl being operated on, The girl in danger was Ofri, not Yaeli. And she wasn't 9 in the dream, but a year old. And the surgeon, the one who came out of the operating room to tell us the results, was Herman. Except that instead of wearing a doctor's white coat, he was wearing a patient's gown, the kind that's open in the back. She couldn't see the opening in the dream, she just knew it was there. Then Herman put his finger between his eyebrows and said, "Ofri will live." And she was surprised that he was talking about Ofri and not Yaeli, but didn't want to ask because she didn't want to ruin the sense of relief she felt. I didn't interpret the dream for her. When we first started going out in Haifa, I once tried to interpret a dream she had. She told me that I was terrible at it, and I should just listen. But even if I had interpreted it for her, I couldn't connect it to what happened a year later. Sure, I would have told her something like, maybe in your dream, only in your dream, you'd rather that Ofri was sick because she's stronger and has a better chance of fighting it. That's how it is. Until you have a second daughter, you don't really understand your first one. Because of Yaeli, we realized how unusual Ofri was, how rare it was, that calmness of hers, her backbone. All her teachers, even in nursery school, always told us that the child was mature for her age. But we needed to go through Yaeli with all her dramas to understand what they were talking about. I'll tell you something that sounds bad, but I don't care. In some way, it would have been easier if what happened had happened to Yaeli. With her, everything's simple. When she's sad, she cries. When she's frustrated, she lies on the floor and screams. Ofri doesn't scream. She absorbs, ponders, quietly considers things, and you have no idea what's going on inside her. Only sometimes, in the end, she says a few precise words, then goes back to looking at the world, absorbing everything she can. I'm telling you, the kid's like walking radar. When she was little, she could tell when Ayelet and I were going to fight just from the energies in the room, and she'd stand between us and say, "Daddy, don't fight." She was also the first to see that there was something wrong with Herman, even before Ruth. One day she came back from their place and said, "Herman's broken." "What do you mean broken?" "He keeps forgetting things." "What things?" "Where he put his glasses, where the door to the garden is, his name." "Maybe he's playing with you, Ofriki. Maybe it's a kind of game." "No, Daddy. He's broken." One evening, a few days later, they knocked on our door. Both of them. Herman went straight to Ofri, asked her for a kiss, and then got down on all fours so she could ride around the living room on him. Ruth handed Ayelet a plate full of slices of her marble cake and asked if she could use our fax. Every once in a while they used it, or asked Ayelet to help them with their old computer that was always getting stuck. And we'd ask them for milk, or eggs, or onions. We don't have what you have in Tel Aviv. Places open 24 hours a day. And if you're out of tomato paste for shakshuka, it means there's no shakshuka, and you'll have to eat your eggs plain, with no tomato sauce. Sometimes they'd run out of oil or sugar, too, but not as often as we did. It wasn't really balanced, but we never bothered to balance it. Just the opposite. We told ourselves that that's what made it great. They were neighbors like neighbors used to be, before people had ulterior motives. I'll tell you even more than that. These last few years, every time we thought about moving to a larger apartment so the girls would have their own room, and Ayelet could have a normal workroom, one of us would say, "But what are we going to do without Herman and Ruth?" And the discussion ended there. So on the day that Ruth came in to use the fax, she didn't go straight to the machine in the corner as she always did, but stayed at the door. Her hair, which she always wore in a ponytail, was loose, and she kept running her fingers through it. She said quietly, "Something's happening to Herman. Something's wrong with him. Yesterday I came home from work and found him wandering around in the street asking passers-by where he lived." Ayelet offered her something to drink and asked her to sit down, and Ruth sighed and sat down. Herman kept galloping around the living room with Ofri on his back. I took Yaeli in my arms so Ayelet could make Ruth a cup of coffee with milk. "All those years alone in the house," Ruth said. It hasn't been good for him. You can go crazy from being alone in the house all day long, Ayelet said, and I said, yes, that's what finally got to me when I was running my own business from home. Then Ruth said, but what can we do? I have to keep working. His pension isn't enough for us. Tell me, I asked her, don't we owe you money? Meanwhile, Hermann sat down on our couch, bounced Ofri on his lap, and sang to her Hoppe Hoppe Reiter, which is the German version of Giddy Up. She screamed with pleasure, and I thought to myself, she's a little too old for these games, a little too old to be on his lap, too old for him to put his hands on her thighs. Ruth said, don't be silly, pay me when you can. Your little girl is a source of joy for Hermann, and that's the most important thing, especially now. Ayelet said, drink your coffee, Ruth. Ruth stopped to take a sip, then continued. He was the most attractive fellow on the kibbutz. Those blue-green eyes of his, like a cat's. And he had that Israeli tan. I was new, right off the boat. When they saw that I couldn't keep my eyes off him, they warned me that one changes girls like they were socks. He's only interested in one thing when it comes to girls. But I didn't care what they said about Hermann. I thought to myself, he's like that because he still hasn't met me. And were you right? Ayelet asked with a smile. Ruth looked at Hermann and Ofri with total seriousness. I was right, and I was wrong. Then suddenly she was quiet, sipping her coffee and running her long pianist's fingers through her hair again. Ayelet told her that if she needed help in the near future, we were there, and I added, don't be shy, really. Thank you, Ruth said. Really, you are wonderful neighbors. That night I said to Ayelet, there's no way Ofri's staying alone with Hermann any more. Yes, you're right, and we have to pay them. It's not right for us to drag it out like this. Do you have any cash? No. Take some out tomorrow, she suggested. Yes, sure. How much do we owe them? I don't know, a lot, at least 600 or 700. Okay, I'll withdraw 1,000. The week after that, we left Ofri with the Wolves twice. Both times it was because we had to take Yaeli to the hospital for tests. Both times Ruth was home. Both times, when we got back, there was nothing unusual in the hug Ofri gave us. She still talked about the ways Hermann was broken, how he put sugar instead of salt in the salami and eggs, and tried to use the air conditioner remote to turn on the TV. Her eyes sparkled with happiness as she spoke. Hermann, it seems, had managed to convince her that it was all a kind of game, and she had an important part to play in it, to remind him about the correct order of things, to give him the right remote, to show him which plants he had to water, to tell him what day it was. Ayelet said in English, so that Ofri wouldn't understand, she's so innocent, smart and innocent. Soon she won't be innocent any more, I said. It's just a matter of time. Ayelet, who's no fool and saw right away that I was heading for that let's-have-another-baby conversation, said, not in English this time, forget it, Arnon, unless you're the one who's going to be pregnant. English, baby, English, I told her. Really, Mommy, Ofri said, boys can't be pregnant. I'm not your girlfriend, Ofri, Ayelet said, so don't talk to me in that tone. What do you want from me? Ofri asked. Why are you always mad at me? Switching back into English, I said, she's right, you know. And Ayelet told me not to mix in. It's complicated between them, between Ofri and Ayelet. Always was. Maybe not the first year when Ofri was nursing, but the minute she stopped and began talking, that tension between them started. 1 minute they were huggy, kissy best friends, and a minute later they were swooping down on each other, claws bored. And the problem is that it has nothing to do with strength. Ofri's strong, very strong, but she has no chance when Ayelet tears into her with all that Ayeletness of hers. She calls it boundaries. The child needs boundaries, but from the beginning I felt that there's more to it, that there's a kind of meanness in the way she talks to her, a kind of sting that's camouflaged really well with Hani. What, for example? She can say to her, look at how many friends come to visit Yaeli. But you're buried in bed all day with your books. Isn't that a shame, honey? Or, do you think that by tomorrow you can decide what to wear, pretty girl? Or, Earth to Ofri, Earth to Ofri. Are you even listening to what I'm saying? Even the pet names she gives her, Astro, Space Girl, Zippy Lips, they're really more critical than affectionate. And sometimes, when she comes home late from the office and Ofri does something smart-alecky that she doesn't like, or is just off in her own world and doesn't answer her, she can really lose it and say nasty things to the kid like, "I'm your mother, so I have to put up with you. I have no choice. Anyone else would just get up and leave if you acted like this with them." Or, I swear she said it, "What did I do wrong to deserve a punishment like you?" It isn't just what she says, it's also the tone. Biting. Merciless. Why are they like that? I don't know. Ofri's pace is slow, a little pensive. Sometimes she really doesn't notice that someone's talking to her. If you try to rush her, she deliberately slows down even more. And Ayelet's the opposite. She's quick, has no patience for anyone who can't keep up with her, and she has a mother who's completely nuts. Maybe that has something to do with it. She beat Ayelet when she was little. And in Ramat Aviv, that upscale North Tel Aviv neighborhood, right? Not in any of those poor South Tel Aviv places. In elegant Ramat Aviv, her mother used to beat her with belts and rulers. And there was no father there to separate them. It just goes to show you, by the way, that you can never know what goes on with people behind their reinforced metal doors. Before Yaeli was born, Ayelet and I used to fight a lot about how to raise Ofri. She would say I was spoiling the kid, and I would say, "Spoiled? The kid's perfect, an angel." After Yaeli came into the family picture, things were a little more balanced. A table stands better on 4 legs. But I still felt that it was crucial for me to be around to watch out for Ofri, to make sure Ayelet wasn't too hard on her, wouldn't cause her the kind of damage that couldn't be repaired later on. I'll tell you something that might sound screwed up to you. After Tavlina made it big, I had offers from Spain and Germany to go and design restaurants there. You wouldn't believe what kind of emails they sent me. "We admire your no-bullshit style of creativity. The atmosphere you create makes people want to order the whole menu." I'll show them to you sometime. In any case, I turned them down, even though it was an opportunity to go out on my own again, and a hell of a professional challenge. The real reason I said no, not the reason I gave Ayelet, was that in order to design restaurants in Europe, you have to stay there for long periods of time, and I didn't see myself leaving those 2 cats alone for so long. Do you see? I always felt a kind of special responsibility for Ofri, and that just makes what happened even worse. Hey, tell me, is it okay to dump all this on you? You're sure? How are you, anyway? I didn't even ask. I saw you on the bestseller list. How much do you make on every book? Is that all? They're fucking you, take it from me. You want me to continue the story? For you, everything's a story, huh? It's just too bad that for me, it's real life. Forget it, where were we? On Mondays, I have a double spinning class. It starts at 7, but you have to get there a little earlier if you want a specific bicycle. Oh, you never did spinning? Okay, so you have good genes. In our family, all the men are overweight, so I have no choice. I have to take care of myself. The exercise bikes in our spinning class are arranged in a semicircle opposite the instructor, numbered. I like number 4, the farthest away from the air conditioner. Every Monday, Ayelet takes Yaeli to Tel Aviv for a special yoga class for kids with respiratory problems, and they come home right afterward so I can leave for spinning at 6:30. That day, they got stuck in traffic. Ayelet called from the car to say they'd be a little late. I told her, take Ayalon south, but she said she was already on Geha. That pissed me off. I always tell her to take Ayalon because there are fewer traffic jams, but she always insists on Geha, because she's used to it. I could already see myself getting to class at the last second and ending up with bike number 19 or 20, which are behind a post. You can't even see the instructor from there. Do you get the picture? I wish I could tell you that I went to Herman and Ruth's because there was an emergency at work, or I had chest pains and needed to get myself to the hospital, but the truth is, that was the whole story. Which bike would I ride in spinning class? Ruth was at the conservatory. I asked Herman when she was coming back, and he said he didn't know. I calculated, if I leave now, Ayelet will be home in 10 or 15 minutes at the most. What could possibly happen in 15 minutes? In the meantime, Ruth would definitely be back. She usually gets home from work at 6:30. And old people don't like to deviate from their routines. That way Ayelet wouldn't even know I left Ofri alone with Herman, and even if she did, so what? Let her take Ayalon next time. Ofri, of course, was in heaven. I explained to her that it was only for a few minutes, that Mommy would be home soon, but she was already riding on Herman's back, and she was shouting Hoppa Hoppa Reiter, the German version of Giddy Up, and wasn't really listening to me. I wanted to warn him, but didn't know how I could phrase a warning without offending him, without his realizing that I didn't trust him. So I didn't say anything. I texted Ayelet, Ofri's with Herman, and Ruth. I changed clothes and left. I'm not sure it would have helped if I'd said anything to him. Even if I'd said, in your condition you shouldn't go out of the house with her, chances are that he would have answered, "Ja," and forgotten it a minute later. I keep my cell phone muted during spinning class. You can't hear anything anyway with the loudspeakers blasting, so it wasn't until the end of the double lesson that I saw that I had 4 unanswered calls. But I still thought that Ayelet just got stuck out of the house without her keys or something, and kept walking toward the showers. Next time she should listen to me and take Ayalon. That's what I was thinking, let her learn her lesson. I took my time under the shower, do you see? I washed my hair, raised the temperature higher and higher until it was almost burning my skin. You like to do that too? And here I thought it was my own private perversion. I didn't look at my phone again until after I'd toweled off. There were already 12 unanswered calls. I called Ayelet, and a few seconds later I was on my way home. How can I explain what a person feels at a time like that? Remember that first time on reserve duty, when Ehrlich drove the jeep into that alleyway in Hebron by mistake? Remember when the concrete block started raining down on us, and that moron couldn't put the vehicle into reverse? Take that and multiply it by 10, by 100, 1,000. In Hebron, I was pretty calm. I had the feeling we'd get out in one piece. Most of the time, I'm calm under pressure. But here, I'll tell you the truth, I lost it completely. I yelled at myself while I was driving, smashed my fists against the wheel. Maybe the difference is that in Hebron I was only responsible for myself, and here I was responsible for my little girl. I knew I screwed up. It was so clear that I screwed up that Ayelet didn't even waste time accusing me. The minute I got out of the car, she filled me in on the situation. The entire building was out searching, and there was also a police car on the way. They were combing our neighborhood, and the adjacent neighborhood too. I said, I'll kill him if he did something to her. I'll just kill him. Ayelet said, we still don't know what happened. Maybe they just got lost. But I saw in her eyes that she was also thinking about the kisses and the Hoppa Hoppa Reiter. I asked if anyone was searching the citrus groves, and Ayelet said no. They hadn't thought that far ahead, so I said, I'll go there and take my gun. Why a gun, she said. If he touched a hair on her head, that's the end of him. When Ofri was in kindergarten, there was a kid there who hassled her. Sar Ashkenazi. She'd come home every day with stories. Sar Ashkenazi said this to her, Sar Ashkenazi did that to her. Ayelet spoke to the teacher, who said she hadn't noticed anything special, and that at that age, they still can't always tell the difference between reality and imagination. Our daughter could always tell the difference, and that was exactly what I said to Ayelet. Our daughter can tell the difference. So one day after I left Ofri in kindergarten, I waited behind a bush for the children to come out into the yard. At first everything was fine. Ofri played with her friends, and I felt pretty stupid, a 40-year-old man hiding behind a bush at 9 in the morning. But then a boy approached them. From behind. I mean, Ofri had her back to him, and that little shit just yanked down her pants and ran away. Then from a few meters away he laughed and said that everyone could see her underpants. You know me. I'm not a violent person. During the Intifada, I used to stay in the kitchen to avoid going out on patrol, remember? But believe me, if you had seen someone pull down your Jonathan's pants, you'd react just like I did. It's a biological instinct, out of our control. What did I do to the kid? Exactly what had to be done. I climbed the nursery school fence, grabbed him, pushed him up against the wall, and told him that if he ever touched off...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?